Well, folks, we're glad to have you here today, again, to the 5th Annual Scholarship of Teaching and Engage Conference. A few years back, in fact, just a little bit over 5 years, Liz Hitch, who was our academic vice president and also an interim president here at UVU, noted how distinctive engaged learning was and a central part of the DNA of Utah Valley University, and said, you know, we really should be the epicenter of the universe for engaged learning and scholarship. So thus gave the beginnings of this conference. Now let me introduce myself to you. I'm Cameron Martin, Vice President of University Relations here at Utah Valley University, and I was asked to give the welcoming address here to officially welcome you and also to introduce our first plenary speaker, Dr. Representative Extraordinaire Rhonda Menlove. Is that good? She's a legislator. I work at the legislature. I have to, well, some say kiss up, but I'm just being sincere. How's that? I'll just call it what it is. It really is. It really is, Rhonda. All right, so here at the conference, a couple things that I wanted to just bring to your attention and remind you that this is the theme of the conference this year is engaged learning, bridging the gap. And there's some opportunities here that what we're trying to do is really bring folks together from the educational, from the community or civic, and the business community to really learn how to better leverage what we do to enhance the integration of these various groups and organizations and entities, increase our level of partnership, and to understand learning, the value of learning by doing. And give you some examples of that and hopefully really give meaning to how higher education in particular can improve the quality of life for our community members as well as for us individually. Some things unique about this conference, it's not your typical academic conference where you come in, have somebody just stand up and read a paper or have a PowerPoint slide that has a gazillion different things on it that you really can't read. Sometimes that happens. I know I've been in some of those classes. Maybe I spoke too soon. I don't know. Did I? Oh, no, thanks. Sorry. So sorry. Just no, yeah. But this is a conference, as you can now tell, where we want your participation and there's engagement in it. It's to create a dialogue and an understanding where we truly do discover and learn together. So what I wanted to give you an illustration of is of the engaged learning environment here at Utah Valley University in particular. Given that you are here, it's only appropriate that we give you a UVU commercial, right? And I mean literally. In fact, what I'm going to do, I'm going to toggle over here and I'm going to show you just 2 of a series of commercials. We have 6 that we've put together through our studios and engineering department here on campus and marketing to really give an understanding of the unique nature of engaged learning here at Utah Valley University. The first one I'm going to show you is about a master's student in math and how she's changing how we perceive math. So bear with me on the technology here.
I hate math. I can't count how many times I've heard people say that. And as a math teacher, I take it personally. So, while working on my master's at UVU, I developed ways to help kids not hate math. Does engaged learning make a difference? You do the math.
Okay, I want to show you another one. One more. There's a sampling of 6, but because of time. Whoops. Gotta go back. Gotta find my. Sorry here. I have an infrastructure meeting right now. Didn't know if you knew that. I wanted you to tell. All right. There we go.
I had an idea. Lots of people have ideas. But engaged learning helped me develop my idea and make it real. And now with sales over $1 million, best assignment ever.
Thank you. Those commercials are representatives represent just some distinctive aspects of Utah Valley University and the importance of engaged learning, right? The last segment that you just saw, Kiss Sticks, these are two young men who actually, if you saw Jay Leno, I think about a week ago, he was interviewing Mark Cuban, the owner of the Dallas Maverick, the gazillionaire down in Texas. He was interviewing because he's on the Shark Tank. You've seen that TV series. And Jay asked him, what's one of the companies you've seen that was like, duh, should have thought of that. And he said, well, these two guys out of Utah Valley State, so he got that kind of wrong, but it's okay, we'll take it. It's a rounding error. He said, in the dorms, like, well, we don't have dorms, but it's okay either. But he said he came up with an idea how to meet women, and apparently it worked because they both got married. And it was how to, kiss sticks. So you have different flavors of lip balm. So each package has two different flavors, and when you kiss, there's literally a chemical reaction, little sparks, if you will. So you can manipulate the exchange depending upon your poison. And he said, I guess it worked because they're both now married. So Kiss Sticks is fun. The actual thing was, when you talk to these young men who started it, they came up with the idea while serving an LDS mission on a sidewalk walking down the street. So not necessarily in the dorms, not necessarily. Anyway, it was kind of fun. But I love the line, best assignment ever, right? So it was an ability to learn how to think, to take our ideas, our thoughts, and put them into action or into form, and then take it to market. The math one I really love too, because how many of us love math? Great, I'm glad. Thanks, Keith. I appreciate the hands up. Bam, he didn't hesitate. And that's great, but how many of us have learned to be fearful of math, right? And so it's that engaged learning can break down those barriers. Why it matters. I want to tell you just briefly one quick story, and then I'll introduce our plenary speaker this morning, Rhonda Menlove. True story. An older woman came into a class I was teaching here at UVU, and it was right at the heels of Geneva Steel closing down. Right, what turned out to be for the very last time. Now, her name was Judy. And Judy, when she was a young woman down in Payson area, that's where she's from, didn't learn how to learn. She didn't understand or was never taught how to do that, how to learn, how to read a textbook, how to take a test, how to engage herself deliberately in the learning experience. She just went into class, put up defenses because she felt she was not very bright. And in fact, unfortunately, one day, a teacher said, "You're stupid. Why don't you just drop out and go to work at the plant down at Geneva? Because that's all you ever amount to be, or to be able to do." Sadly, Judy took that advice and she dropped out. For 30 years, Judy was in the coal, shoveling coal into the coke plant process, shoveling to heat up to melt the metal. Because that's all she thought she could do. Now, I mean no disrespect to that job or that company at all. In fact, she loves it. And when she talked to near dear friends from her, and they treated her very well. However, when she first came into class, she sat in that back far right corner of my classroom. I mean, 30 years of shoveling stuff. She was rock. And crew cut, she was firm. And if she wanted to mug me, I would say, "Here, just take it," because she'd kick my rear end, if you will. She was really rough. She had built up so many walls and defenses about the learning experience. Well, we taught her how, in the student success class, how to take a class, how to work with a professor, how to work with your peers, read a textbook, all these things. In a few weeks, and then the first day, by the way, she said, "I'm only here because I have to maintain my union contract, and only to do that I have to go back to school while the plant is out." Just that big. And as soon as it opens, I'm out of here. So, okay, Judy, no worries. But while you're here, let's help you. If you're willing to help yourself, I'm willing to help you. A few weeks later, one of the greatest moments I've ever had on a college campus, Judy walks in and says, look, and she shoves a piece of paper into my face. And I looked at it, and I was like, "Oh, great, Judy. This is great. She got an A on an assignment. I said, that's fantastic. And she goes, no, no, no. It's not the A. It's the fact that I'm not stupid. It's the fact that I know I can learn. It's the fact that I now don't care if the plant ever opens again. I believe and know I can do whatever it is I want to do. The power of learning how to do it. And she did. She wanted to learn to make people happy through cooking. So she enrolled and graduated with honors in our culinary arts program. The power of engaged learning is just that, illustrated by Judy's story. It bridges, right? It bridges the gap of self-doubt, disengagement, if you will, and really brings to life opportunities of self-discovery and opportunity. So that's what this conference truly is about. How do we do that to positively influence and impact the Judys of the world, to give them the opportunity to choose what they want to do and to be passionate and excellent at doing that. So in that light, you're officially welcome to our 5th annual conference this year, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you, oh, excuse me, I had one more picture on here, and that was not of Judy, but she went from one flame to, you know there's that saying, you go from the frying pan into the fire? She went from the fire into the back to the frying pan, which is great, right? So that's not Judy as a picture, but anyway. Whoops, Rhonda, I just missed, here we go. Technology glitch right there. All right. So it gives me great pleasure now to introduce to you our plenary speaker this morning. Rhonda Menlove is a senior vice provost and an associate professor in special education at Utah State University, USU. She's currently on special assignment working on USU partnership with Salt Lake Community College to deliver bachelor's degree programs in the Salt Lake area. Dr. Menlove is a member of the House of Representatives, serving in her 9th year. Previously, she served in the House Majority Assistant Whip. Dr. Menlove is married to Martell Menlove, State Superintendent of Utah Public Education. They have 5 children, all with degrees from USU. Go Aggies. It's been the Aggie year in many ways, has it not? It's been great. My father-in-law still sports his Aggie ring. He's an Aggie. Once an Aggie, always an Aggie. That's great. And 7 grandchildren. I personally have worked with Rhonda in a variety of capacities over the years, but most recently through this past legislative session, she proved to be just a steady hand, a wise mind, and somebody who acted true to what her values are, and something I greatly respect. Rhonda, please come up. Welcome Rhonda Menlove.
Okay, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about bridging the gap between policy and higher education. And you might think, is there a gap? There may be a gap, or there may not be a gap. We'll figure that out as we go through our conversation. But I'm going to take my unique experiences as from your world, being a higher education faculty member and administrator, and talk to you about the policy aspects as well in my work at the Utah Legislature. So this will be a unique opportunity for me to get your feedback on some of the policy issues that we're dealing with. But we're in a very unique time in higher education, and I know that all of you are aware of the many changes that are happening in higher education. And our world is changing, and sometimes it's not because we choose it to change in higher ed, sometimes it's because it just happens. We're changing where we work. I work with faculty members that I never see physically, that we just see virtually. They instruct completely online. They work with students who are virtual to them, and they live wherever they choose to live, and their office is wherever they choose to have their office. We are changing where we teach. Many of these faculty members that I work with teach from home, teach from off-site locations. I even work with a faculty member who teaches from the mountainside, goes out, prepares his class, takes his camera, sets it up on the hillside, films what he's going to teach, goes back to his office, puts it up, and sends out his lecture. So the students get that sense that they're out in the field. We're changing how we teach. It used to be that we went to a lecture hall, that our students came into the classroom, we put the PowerPoint up, they got their notebooks out, they started taking notes. In many ways, we're not teaching in that same manner. We may be, but many of us are teaching in a very different manner. We're also changing how students learn. I'm very optimistic. I believe that we're creating a generation of learners who are in our higher education classrooms who are taking greater responsibility for their own learning. They're much more engaged and more responsible. When a student has an online class that they're taking, they have to structure their time, they have to structure when they do their work, they have to structure how they complete their assignments, in what time frame, in what manner, how they interact with their peers. Very different from coming to a traditional classroom where they're together, seated during a specific lecture time, completing maybe assignments that are assigned in class. We're also changing how we're measuring learning. And I had a great discussion this week with one of our USU lead instructional designers about measuring student learning. This is going to become one of the hottest topics that we face as university personnel, the measurement of learning. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about why that is going to be absolutely critical. We can no longer accept the position of faculty members that we teach, students learn. It's the student's responsibility to learn, our responsibility to teach. There's a shifting paradigm happening in higher education where we are going to be judged and evaluated based upon student outcomes and student learning. This is going to be an incredibly important trend for us. It's not only happening in higher education, but public education as well. Student outcomes are becoming absolutely critical. We're also changing how policymakers view our work. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about federal level policy today and a little bit about state policy and how policymakers are viewing what we in higher education do. I think we're at an incredible intersection in our careers. We're at an intersection where policy makers are becoming much more active in higher education, more so than they ever have been, and technology is becoming much more critical factor in how we teach and learn. So I think we're at this really I think it's a cool intersection because I'm passionate about distance education and I'm also passionate about policy. So you're getting my bias today, but I believe that we're at we have an exciting opportunity with advanced technology and hopefully positive policy making that will help create opportunities for us to be better at what we do in terms of teaching and engaging students in creating learning outcomes. Utah is unique in many ways. Utah has made a significant investment in video conferencing and web-based conferencing to be used in instruction in higher education. Just for my own interest, how many of you have taught using video or web conferencing? So some of you have taught using, since I've been at Utah State University, I did teach a class periodically on campus, but almost all of my teaching has been virtual. So I know UEN's network well. We have been very lucky in Utah that our policymakers have decided to invest a significant amount of funding to create the UEN backbone. We have a backbone, network backbone, that is the envy of many states across the nation. As I talk with my colleagues in other states, very few states have invested in the kind of backbone that we have that brings can bring instruction to any community in the state. So we have a statewide UEN backbone. We also have advanced technology there. We have a team of technologists at UEN who are constantly finding new types of media for us to use. How many of you have used Canvas in Structure? Yeah, all of you, yes. Now, we're really lucky too in that UEN and policymakers have decided to fund Canvas. Institutions pay a portion of the cost, but really the legislature funds a significant part of that. Additionally, we have an enhanced connectivity. I can go to Kanab, Utah, which is fairly remote, or I can go to Grouse Creek, Utah. Many of you probably have never been to Grouse Creek, Utah. It's up in the far, far west corner. I represent that area in the legislature. But I can go to Grouse Creek, Utah, and walk in that one-room school, the 18 kids that are in school there. On their wall, they have a huge interactive video screen. And the last time I was there, the kids had Google Maps up, and they said, "Okay, tell us your address." And they were going to my address. They were zooming in, and they were saying, "Wow, look at what you have parked in your driveway." You know, and they were having fun with that. But here are kids in the most remote corner of Utah, very remote. You can't even get cell phone coverage. But they have UEN backbone, and they are able to learn using technology. They're connected with kids and instructors all over the state because they're so isolated. We have dispersed faculty. Many of you in your career would have the opportunity, if you wanted to teach from a different location. And at Utah State University, we have a variety of faculty members scattered around the state, and we no longer hire all of our expertise in Logan. We have 2 Stanford biologists in the Uinta Basin and Vernal at our Uinta Basin campus. And you might wonder, why would these biologists go to the Uinta Basin? Well, it's an energy-rich area, and they were fascinated with the opportunity to do their research in the Uinta Basin. They are highly skilled. They could be at any institution in the United States, but they chose to go there. We're starting to disperse faculty across the state, and I know you have faculty who travel and who teach from various locations as well. We have redefined classrooms. If I go into a classroom now and there isn't all of the technology available to me, I feel like that classroom is naked. You know, there's something wrong in that classroom if I can't plug in, if I can't use the internet. It's an unusual feeling. And we also have expanded learning opportunities for students. My job at Utah State University is, for the most part, been with non-traditional students coming back to school and distance education. And so I get to have this great experience that Cameron talked about. I've had that experience time and time again with students coming back and having opportunities. Can you imagine if you're a person living in Moab, Utah, and you'd like a university degree, and you know you're locked into that community and you can't leave, and we can bring you through video conferencing and online learning a whole variety of degree options. That's incredible to people. And I know UVU and other institutions, Weber State, Utah State, University of Utah, we're all working very hard right now. We're seeing almost an explosion of online opportunities for students to learn and grow. In terms of online learning, I want to talk to you a little bit about how online learning has become the norm. How many of you have taught online classes? So some of you. How many of you have taught classes where there's an online piece to it, maybe a hybrid class? So more too. So this is becoming the norm. Very few of us are teaching anymore without some kind of integration. 77% of all the chief academic, every year Sloan does a survey on online learning. You can Google the Sloan Consortium and check out their surveys. It's fascinating. It's been fascinating to watch. They just completed their 10th survey. And in that survey, they surveyed chief academic officers who were saying that 77% of those chief academic officers feel like online learning and the outcomes for students are either the same as or better, superior to what they get in a face-to-face class. Now, I've been around. I'm old enough to have been around for a while, and I remember. It's so interesting to watch this question come up again as I work with various departments in creating online courses and delivering distance programs. The question always comes up about quality. Will the quality be the same? And it's fascinating because we have years and years of research answering this very same question. And the question is, yes, it's the same or better. In fact, there was a great study conducted in public education looking at hybrid classes, showing superior outcomes continually in the hybrid kind of environment. So Finally, our chief academic officers are on board with us, those of us who've been teaching and learning via technology. They're understanding that we can create outcomes that are as good or better. 30% of higher ed students right now have integrated into their schedule at least one online class. And I know from working with other institutions across the state, most institutions are offering a variety of courses. So a student may be taking a face-to-face, maybe taking a broadcast class, picking up a couple online classes. Students are mixing and matching to meet their needs. It's always fascinating when I talk to kids, traditional students who are on our campus in Logan, and they say, oh yeah, I'm taking a whole bunch of online classes. I just hang out in my dorm, I get up, I do my homework. It's just wonderful. I socialize all night, and it's great, and life is good. So it's fascinating to me that, you know, as a parent, you send your kid away to school, they're hanging out in their dorm room doing their homework. You think maybe they could be doing that at home. But anyway, students now are just engaged in a very different learning environment. This is fascinating, and I would be interested in your reaction to this. Do you believe that this is true? CAOs believe that that faculty lack of acceptance is the barrier to widespread adoption of online education. So do you agree with that, or do you think this is a misperception? Do you feel resistance from your colleagues?
I don't know that it's necessarily lack of acceptance as it is lack of skill or lack of familiarity with the technologies from both faculty and students. There's a learning curve for people to learn how to manipulate the technology, but once they get it, I think there's rapid adoption.
Great, great. So you'd say exposure, support, learning. Anyone else? Yes. I think that's a great point. That is a great point. The incentives are not always in place, and that's what you're saying. The incentives that you'll be judged on are in this arena, and this is the teaching then becomes the lesser arena. You know, we've been working with some teachers who are integrating their teaching into research and doing research on their teaching, and that's one bridge that I've worked with a couple of professors who are doing some exciting things in that, one a biologist. So, but hopefully someday we'll be able to get to that, right? Yes.
Well, in our department, it feels like they just want to do it the right way, you know, because you don't want to invest a lot of time and energy and money into doing it in a way that's not working. Because we're in math, they're actually thinking of dropping the hybrids because the students are having such a hard time. We're having very poor outcomes.
Really?
And it could just be our subject materials, or it could be the way we're implementing it. You know, I don't know. But
Great.
you know, we need to do it in a way that is helpful for students, not hurtful.
And so what you're saying is then exactly what I'm trying to make the point about the science of teaching. So you get there, you find out your outcomes are not what you would hope that, so you then readjust the instruction, maybe you go back. We did that. We had a failed experiment with Newton. I don't know if any of you know it. Newton, it's a math program, and we were taking remedial students and placing them in Newton. And we thought because it was on pace, we had virtual tutoring, all sorts of supports for them. But it was very hard for them to move through the subject matter. So now we've got them back on a more traditional schedule. So you're right, we're experimenting and learning. Great point.
I've heard some faculty talk about they're worried about their job, that being replaced when you could take a class from the person
Yeah.
standard, right?
Yes.
This, and we
Yep.
only need one, and I can reach 10,000 students from this university and this one, and they're like, no, this is horrible. We don't want to do that because they would be worried about their job.
Exactly, and that just leads us to the MOOC. I mean, exactly, that's exactly what MOOCs can do. They can reach thousands of people, and you can take a Stanford class well, from a Stanford professor, probably with a TA doing most of the interaction with you, the way they're designed. You know, they have the professor's name, professor may design the course, and then a TA, the model that I know best. But that's the trend. I mean, that is a trend. And you have to wonder, will cost savings lead to cost cut or faculty cut? So I think that's a real fear. Good point, yes.
The whole system, the whole pattern, the whole social everything at a university is based on how much time and how we all spend, you know, these butts in the seat.
Yes.
You come and then we have a program that tells us when to leave, when to lift, when to move the butt somewhere else. And
Yeah.
it's the whole pattern of what we do. Even with faculty.
Exactly. And we do those I don't know if you guys do those at your institutions where you have to fill out how you use your time. You know, I've never figured out how to do that. I've never figured out how you do 8 hours of work to get your work done as a faculty member. I mean, not that I ever could get it into 8 hours, not that I couldn't fill up 8 hours, just that how do you put 20 hours on one of those faculty reporting sheets? Yes.
I think there's a real concern about distance education just replicating substandard practices, especially when it comes to MOOCs, where we're not involved in an engaging environment. And I think that the concern with distance ed is that it just reinforces those poor university practices that have been on the site.
Great point. If we don't, and that's where we're getting to the learning outcome. If we're not doing the entire package, you're absolutely right. If students aren't engaged, and we know that learning requires engagement, it does require engagement, and greater engagement creates greater learning. All of you know that as teachers. So anyway, MOOCs they're the hottest thing. Of course, everybody is getting a MOOC. We have a MOOC at Utah State University. We have a MOOC program now that's being developed. And who's driving this? It's private entities like Coursera, academic partnerships. I don't know if you guys are being approached by academic partnerships to put, the promise of great revenue by putting your programs out there all over the place. But this is a new trend, this constant approach from private companies to help us do our work and feel like they can help us do our work better. So we're in an interesting environment, and you're raising some great questions. Let me just move on. Access, and this gets to the next step in access that I'm reading about is competency-based credit. And all of us in Utah are well aware of the Western Governors model, right? We all know how that works. You go to Western Governors, you enroll. When you reach your competency, you get your credit. If you do that quickly, you get your credit much more quickly. If you don't, then you can take a longer period of time. So just this past couple of weeks, the U.S. Department of Ed has now endorsed, this is so fascinating to me, in competency-based education with a letter saying that colleges can now get federal approval for degree programs that do not rely on the credit hour to measure student learning. Isn't it kind of fascinating, fascinating that U.S. Department of Ed is giving us permission to do what a lot of us have been doing for a long time? I thought this was like absolutely funny.
You know, what's interesting, in contrast to this, the Department of Labor has just put the pressure on all the regional accrediting bodies to now insist that each institution has a very clear credit hour policy. It has to be done by the summer. And it is based on 3 hours. I mean, it's based on the old lecture format. It's kind of like moving backwards. We're getting really mixed messages.
Wow, really? So Department of Labor saying this, imagine policymakers, Cameron, doing this. One agency saying this and another agency saying this, and you all know that we're out there doing whatever, right? Exactly. We fill those reports out and then we go about doing our work. But that's fascinating. I'll have to do more looking at that because there is a huge push to do away with the credit hour, the seat time, and move to alternate. And we're all, the U.S. Department of Ed is pushing that, and it really has an impact on student aid. That's where it has a big impact on federal student aid.
So what would be the value add of a competency-based education versus the credit hour?
The Western Governors' philosophy is that people learn at different rates, and they bring in a team of professionals who design the programs. They establish what the competencies are. They are heavy into assessment. So what they do is, like, and I've had 2 nephews go through their MBA program, but also I have a colleague who was their assessment person at Western Governors for a long time. But so they're continually assessing the students. So if you're a student, you go through your work and the materials that you've been provided, you say, hey, I'm ready to be assessed, then you're assessed and you get your credit. So it's that kind of a movement through. And the benefit is, I'm going to show you some other data in just a minute that will give you some insight into this. The benefit is that a self-motivated person can move really quickly through a program. And I know a person who, in my community, who said, I want a degree from Western Governors to enhance her job. She was a nurse, and they have a bachelor's of nursing on, competency-based. And so she just did nothing but that. She took a leave from work and did nothing but that and finished her. She had her associate degree, and she finished her last 2 years in a short amount of time. I think it was under 9 months. So for some people who are highly motivated, it works. But they have an interesting problem because they have many people that doesn't work for. I have incompletes on my transcript as an undergrad. I'm sorry, probably makes my credibility go down, but I have 10 hours of incomplete in French because I was doing an individualized program where you learn French. I was a Spanish major. And it just so happened I took it in the winter, and it was a winter when there was great snow. And I happen to love skiing a lot more than French. And I can tell you my skiing was superb that year. 6 days a week on the slopes was wonderful, but my French incompletes are there. I'm not a person who would do well in that kind of environment. I like a much more structured, interactive. But some people love it, and that's why Western Governors, their enrollments have gone crazy. They are just really high. They're one of our biggest competitors in higher ed.
This may be on a completely different topic, but your comment made me think about it. In many cases, one of the major purposes of at least some of the top universities is networking. You pay the high tuition because of the connections you will make that will make a huge difference in your career. How does that translate in a virtual world where you may have no connections with anyone else you're involved with? And another big part of the university model has to do with contacting alumni for ongoing funding. Has there been discussion of or research regarding the obligation that people might feel toward their virtual university, later in their life?
I think that's a great question. I think that's a really relevant question. And I'll relay that on. I've not heard of anyone looking into that to alumni connection. The networking piece, if we do distance education well, we can create those kind of networks. Distance education not done well or online learning not done well, then we don't create those kind of networks. And I'll just give you an example. I did a totally broadcast with online support special education program, and the people were scattered all over the state. We would bring those people together just once during that experience where they all came together. And it was fascinating to just sit back and watch the room when we brought the people when they first came in the room. They're like, oh, you're so-and-so from Vernal. I've seen you on the screen. You're so-and-so. They had really formed bonds. And what we are finding is people establish cross-community relationships and the working groups now. We've got a classroom we've just built in Logan that allows us to put students at tables, and using web conferencing, we can break the class into groups. So this group, we do it, it's a video conference lecture and interaction, but then the students break up, they sit around the tables, they have a screen on their table, and they move to web conferencing, and they work together doing their work. So done well, but it takes a lot of work. It takes creativity, and this is not something you can just show up in the morning and do. You have to really get into it and think about it. Yes?
Just real quick back here to the comment here about the value on the competency-based learning. I've spent many years in the private sector, signed the front of a lot of paychecks. I would much rather have somebody that is competent, that's learned, an MRP or
Yeah.
whatever it is, or than to have a person who's a good test taker. And that's why University of Phoenix, right? They were one of the first to come out and say, we're
Right. Right. And I was thinking about this as I was preparing. You guys have, you know, all of you work in institutions where you have young men and young women who come back from LDS missions in other parts of the world. They come back with a language competency. Do we make them go take Spanish 101, 102? No, or 1010, whatever we call it, 1020. No, we say to them, take that exam. You pass that exam, you can pay, you can get that credit. So we're already doing that. But when we say, let's do competency measurement in other areas, we seem to be hesitant. I think competency measurement is going to be, as I look at it working with adults, it's going to be a hot issue, and I'm going to run out of time, so I better show you some policy stuff now. I want to show you affordability. Funding structures are changing. In Utah, we've just been through the recession. It was nationwide. Utah was hit maybe less hard, but we lost funding in higher education. Funding is coming back to our institutions of higher education, but not in the same way. The legislature is giving us money back in terms of mission-based and equity funding. Mission-based, meaning that we as higher education institutions have been telling the legislature, this is what our mission is, this is where we need funding. Also, we're seeing a loss of federal funding for grants, research. We're turning now to private entities, and you may have seen some controversy because of some social research that's been funded by conservative think tanks. And anyway, there's just great controversy with that. Also, we have become absolutely reliant on tuition. So look at this. You won't be able to see individual institutions well, but look at the trend lines there. The bottom line is UVU. You'll see from 1985 to 2013, the drop in funding. You'll see that this session, though, we provided additional funding and a bump up. This is 1985. The blue is how much state funding institutions are getting. The red is how much tuition students are paying. Now look at 2013. Look at the blue, how it's decreased. State funding, and this is a national trend, state funding is continually decreasing while tuition is increasing. Are we becoming absolutely tuition dependent? We are. Why are we all panicked about maybe not losing enrollment because of the mission change? Because we're tuition dependent. Look at the tuition rates and the variability in these. And I want you to look at that break right after Western Governors. You'll see the difference between a Snow College, Salt Lake Community College, and the University of Utah. But then look at the difference between University of Utah and Newmont University. Newmont University is a tech university located in Salt Lake. Kids from all over the country come here to Utah for the Utah experience to get a technology degree. $37,000 a year to be enrolled. Many of these students are on financial aid. If you want to know what the financial aid crisis is and why we have a debt crisis, look at the for-profits. I could really launch into that, but I'm going to be politically cautious. Utah spends the lowest, we're the third lowest spending state per degree, $42,000 per degree average. We have the third lowest debt to degree ratio, meaning our kids walk away with the least debt. We're third lowest in the kind of debt our kids walk away with, $7,000. The debt to degree ratio varies, about 1,600 at USU Eastern, about 12,000 at UVU. So, meaning USU Eastern is a two-year program, has been, that's why they're so low. But look at, by comparison, remember that for-profit tuition I showed you? Look at the debt that kids are walking away with. $30,000 at Utah Massage Therapy. My niece just went through that program, has been unable to get a paying job. You know, you go, you wait for customers. It's been very frustrating. She's just changed careers now. And to Stevens Henniger, average debt to degree is $65,000. Stevens Henniger, you pay up. I don't hope there's no one here from Stevens Henniger. I don't want to offend you, but you pay up front for your degree, and then you go, but you pay up front. And so students who don't finish walk away with a high level of debt. And Western Governors, this is fascinating because I think people launch into that. They have a debt to degree ratio of $80,000. What that really is telling us that it is an anomaly. Many people enroll, but few finish. So that's why their debt-to-degree ratio is really high. And but we're in the best of all worlds. We pay a little bit. We don't invest as well, and but our students don't. We have low tuition. That tells you why we have low amounts of funding. Okay, the $10,000 degree, $10,000 degree. This is hot. This is on the minds of everyone. You might wonder what's happening in Utah. Senator Steve Urquhart is the appropriations chair from the Utah Senate. Senator Urquhart has, he's figured out a way by taking concurrent enrollment, kids can get a $3,000 or a $10,000 degree, depending on where they go after that. Taking concurrent enrollment, getting the New Century Scholarship, and then going to school. So you're going to hear more about this as we go forward, trying to cut back the costs for students, create a more affordable degree. Okay, what do we know about education? What do we know about the value of it? What's the community impact? If you look at this chart, you can Google this. This is the Bureau of Labor Statistics chart on unemployment and weekly earnings. You'll see the more education you get, the more likely you are to be employed, the less likely you are to be poor. We know that education still pays. You may hear people talk about degrees to nowhere. You may hear people bashing the need for higher education. Don't believe it. It's still, these are current data. It still pays to have a great education. Impact on the family. There's solid research telling us that people who have education are less likely to be in poverty. That makes sense. They're less likely to be on government support programs, less likely to be in jail, which I think is an important factor when I look at the corrections budget and think how many higher education things we could be doing if we didn't have to fund the prison. They have better health, they live longer, they have happier marriages, they're more likely to stay married, their kids achieve better. There's just an overall impact on the family. So education, you should never apologize for encouraging people to gain higher education degrees. It improves their lives, but it ripples out. Number one factor in a kid's reading scores in elementary school is the mother's education level and her ability to learn. Impact on the community. If you look at this chart here, it tells us that jobs requiring education are growing at 10 times the rate of jobs for people with just a high school diploma. And over half of our Utah employers tell us that we need better educated workers. Employers, business leaders got together and formed Prosperity 2020. And how many of you have heard about Prosperity 2020? I'm kind of hoping you saw the ads. And Prosperity 2020 has been very, very active, very effective in working with the legislature. Working with Prosperity 2020, the governor and higher education leaders set a goal of 66% of Utahns with some sort of certificate or degree by the year 2020. So we're looking at one-year degrees, one-year certificates, two-year degrees, four-year degrees. We want to increase the number of educated people in our state with a special emphasis on STEM that was just funded by the Utah legislature. And you can find this information on Prosperity 2020's website. So policymakers are seeking outcomes. You're going to see some new trends in policy funding. We're going to be giving more and more funding for technology. You're going to see that coming from the legislature. You're going to see some small projects looking at rewarding universities and programs on degree completion. You're going to be asked a lot more about completion than you are about enrollment in the coming years. You're also going to be asked to measure the competence of your students. This is going to be something that you're going to hear from policymakers. How competent are your students? We're also going to be pushing very hard for employer surveys. Okay, you might judge that that student is competent based upon the curriculum that you're delivering. Now when that person gets out into the workforce, are they competent and able to do their job? You're going to see a big push for this connection between the higher education and outcome business. And this has huge economic impact. Okay, I just want to show you, just in closing, the Utah Legislature's web page. This is Utah Legislature's web page. You can go to it. It's le.utah.gov. You can follow the legislature. You can follow what we do. You can follow the bills that we pass. And I would really encourage you, this past election cycle, Education First was organized. It's a group of business and community leaders who got together, provided funding for candidates, supported races. But what they did that was even more important than the funding was they pushed people to become delegates and to become candidates. We had a much more education-friendly legislature this last session because people in education were involved. Just by show of hands, how many of you went to your caucus meetings in your communities? Okay, I'm giving you homework. And we'll have another election cycle in 2014. I'm giving you homework. Find out your party affiliation. You're going to have to do that in Utah. Well, unless you're Democrat, you can go without affiliating. But go to your party caucus meeting. Go in your full higher education persona and say, I am a pro-education supporter, and try to become engaged in that process. That's where the action takes place in terms of influencing policy in Utah, is getting involved at the grassroots level. Find out, you can get on this website, find out who your senator and representative are, give them a call, send them an email, let them know who you are and how important education is. And anyway, it's been great to be here with you, Anton, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about things that I feel most passionate about. So thank you very much.